in this time as we talk about information literacy, in this time as we talk about what we can trust and what we can't trust, as we talk about how we move forward as a democracy, as a society, the work that Lee and the Pew Institute do are simply crucial and amazing. And I'm so honored and so thrilled that we could get him here today. So will you please help me welcome Lee Rainie.
Good, because I have to move forward so I can see my slides. I haven't memorized.
Would you like me to keep the beer?
You can have the beer.
All right.
Unless the crowd gets hostile.
That's why.
Yeah, I can fight back. It's such an honor to be here, and congratulations, all you amazing students. And as I hear about the work you're already doing, I'm thinking about the things that lie in your future. One of you is going to write a chatbot that's going to serve as the first order reference librarian for your libraries. Another one of you is going to write an artificial intelligence program that helps you make smarter decisions about your collections. This story about the evolution of information and how people build it into their lives, you guys are the pioneers, and I hope you help us get to a future that's happier than sadder. I hope this works. Good. As you heard David say, I come from a place that self-describes as a fact tank. And we do that intentionally because there are other parts of the political system, especially in Washington, where I come from, that are described as think tanks. And we're not in the line of work that think tanks are in. Think tanks are made up of really smart, wonderful people. Maybe some of you have worked or will work for them. They see problems in the world, they think about solutions in the world to solve those problems, and then they advocate aggressively for those solutions. We are not in the solutions business. I'm funded by the Pew Charitable Trusts, a big foundation that's anchored in the Sunoco oil fortune. Pew is a family name. Mr. Pew found some oil in Pennsylvania and made a lot of money off it, and the kids who inherited it have created a big charity, and that's where we get our money. But it would be a firing offense if I expressed a personal opinion here tonight, so please don't tweet about anything I seem to say that's off script. There's no agenda driving our work. So we're funded by Pew to be good generators of first-rate data about the way the world is. And we hope that people like you can use that data to make sense of the world and to change the world in interesting ways, but we don't do it from the perspective of being change agents ourselves. Well, I'm not funded to be a cheerleader for the internet. I'm not funded to be a cheerleader for librarians. I think I keep getting asked back to library events because our data work out really well for librarians. There's a lot of love in the world for librarians. That's how David and I first met, because that was the sort of premise of what we were both talking about. But that's not the purpose of why Pew funds it. It just is a nice, lucky thing that things work out that way. Also, you can tell already about me that I am a child of the two worst speaking cultures in America. I grew up in New York, so I speak really, really fast. Sorry, South Carolina. And then I moved to Washington halfway through my life, and I went to the boot camp that taught me how to speak really, really long. I'm a filibuster. So one of the ways I self-modulate here is to invite you to ask me questions along the way. If I say things you'd like to ask me to explain more, if I say things that strike you as ridiculous and you'd like to challenge me, if I've left something out that matters to you, let's be in dialogue. We've got some time here. I'd much rather answer your questions. We've had nice cupcakes, we've maybe had nice wine and beer, and that's a much nicer way to spend the evening than a data nerd. I've got 60 slides with amazing amounts of data on it. I promise you I won't go through them all. And so you have to ask me questions along the way, and I will stop every once in a while to make sure that you're with me and to make sure that you feel invited to ask me questions. So let's start right there. Any questions about me and Pew and where I come from and why I'm doing what I'm doing? The title, see, I interrupted you already. Any questions? Okay. So the title of my talk tonight, it's a brand new thing for me. So I'm road testing some big stuff that we're doing at Pew. As a matter of fact, just when David and I first started talking about me coming here tonight, We didn't know that today, at 2 p.m. today, the Pew Research Center, some colleagues of mine who are anchored in the unit that does a lot of political analysis, issued an enormous report about the state of public thinking about democracy in America. What do they think is working? What do they think is not working? What are some of the problems they see and stuff like that? And so I called my talk Trust, Truth, and Democracy, because those are the three anchors of things that we are really anxious to be studying at Pew these days, because they are so central to our current circumstances as well as our future circumstances. So I'm going to run through a whole bunch of data on each of those subjects. Again, please interrupt me. I get enthusiastic about our data, and I just will run away with things if you don't stop me. So trust, here's sort of some anchoring data. We, like a lot of other polling organizations, Pew does a lot of national opinion surveys. They're representative of the entire adult population of the United States. We do work, Gallup does work, a whole bunch of other organizations do work, and the government, the reputation of the government couldn't be lower. Well, I guess it could be zero, but it's pretty darn close to zero compared to where it was at the dawn of the 1970s. The reputation of government, people don't trust it anymore. There are data on it. And it turns out, though, that there are interesting nuances in that data. So when you ask a standard question, just overall, trust government or not, really low answers. But when you begin to unpack that idea by different aspects of our government, it turns out that there's interesting variation in how people trust. So it's not a just uniformly bleak story about trust in major institutions declining. And there's actually, so in this case, you can see that since the, I shouldn't touch this.
It's like a big iPad.
It's like a big iPad. Thank you, Steve Jobs. So here are some data of ours showing actually that since the 1973, the reputation of the military is greater than it used to be. Unfortunately, neither we nor the Gallup folks who develop a lot of these data have asked consistently over the years about librarians, but the great story about librarians is that you are one of the three groups whose reputation has held up during this carnage of decline of trust in other institutions. You want to guess what the other two groups are? Firefighters, nurses. Teachers haven't done badly. There's a little bit of a decline that sort of maps with people's disillusionment with the sort of broad education system. But you guys have bucked the trend. And I think partly it's because you're nice people and you're smart people. And that your relationship with others is built on those interpersonal things. You're not just a faceless institution at some distant locale. You are in their lives, and particularly in lives that depend now increasingly, as some of your research showed, where people are dependent on their smart allies as they solve problems, make decisions, stuff like that, especially in the health field. So you guys are anchored in people's personal networks in a way that sets you up really well for the future, and people hope you will do it. But my basic point of showing you this slide is that trust is a differentiated thing for people. It's not just all or nothing. There are interesting nuances in how people think about trust. These are rankings of different government agencies. Look, even the IRS has more people thinking favorably about it than unfavorably about it. So we unpack this idea of trust by looking at different agencies as well as different functions of government. And there are interesting nuances in these data. It's not, again, sort of everything looks great, everything looks bad. There's variance along the way. Then there's declining trust in media. That's a big part of the story. I used to be a journalist. When I come to college audiences, I always apologize that I used to work for U.S. News and World Report because we do the rankings. I wasn't involved very much in the rankings, but I was an interesting observer. I'm sorry for any grievances you might have with that. But the decline of trust in government has mapped with the decline in trust in major media in the past generation or so. And there's an interesting rise in the role of the internet in people's lives and getting news and stuff like that. So the the delivery mechanism for lots of information, especially news, which people care a lot about, is the internet now. As a matter of fact, for young people, the internet is a more important source of news than local TV, which used to be the Mac Daddy, source for everything and everyone in all possible circumstances. It's now the internet surpasses local television news, especially. And there's interesting ways now that the young look different in their information consumption patterns than old folks. One of the artifacts of this new environment where the information world has exploded in choice is that the news environment has become balkanized. When we ask people about trust in different sources, we get interesting variants. Some people rely on a cluster of major sources for their news. Those are, I am so sorry. I just gotta stop this very tactile thing that I do. I'm also a touchy-feely guy. So when we ask about what news sources they rely on, people who are consistently liberal rely on a cluster of things: CNN, NBC, MSNBC, NPR, New York Times, and a bunch of other stuff. Conservatives anchor in Fox News. These are 2014 data. There was interesting, we didn't quite ask the question the same way, but since then, the rise of Breitbart and other even more affiliated with the alt-right circumstances are sort of favorite conservative sources. And this is a really busy, stupid slide, but the whole point to show you here is how these boxes change. So different people gravitate to different sources when they're allocating their trust. That's what's happening as people think about government agencies. It's what's happening when people think about news sources. It's not a uniform indictment when they say they don't trust the media. They do trust some sources. It's just not the totality of the media environment. And so these sort of varying colors, depending on which side of the political spectrum you're on. And that's part of the situation that people are experiencing when they're talking about a polarized culture and a polarized media culture. The other thing that's going on, interestingly, in the media world is that with the rise of social media now, the whole business of social media is to gather up your attention as a social media user and then sell it to advertisers, right? So they're advertising dopamine machines, right? They want to keep dosing you with information about your friends, information about the world and stuff like that. And it turns out that the most incendiary kinds of language, the most annoying and argumentative kinds of information, the most extreme kinds of pieces of information and pieces of content from different sources get the most engagement as it is measured in social media. So it's likes and comments and shares and stuff like that. This is how we looked at posts from congressional offices. And the more indignant the language was, the more likes it got, the more comments it got, and the more shares it got. So congressmen, there's an incentive in this system, both for the media companies as well as for the advertisers, as well as for the people who want to get lots of likes in their Facebook posts, to be more indignant, more angry, more incendiary. And this chart just shows you that the more politically uniform, the more politically extreme folks, again, sort of get the most engagement on social media. So that's what's going on in the trust environment. There's lots of ferment in it, and it ties very much what's going on with truth. And there are a couple of issues that come up with truth, and it sounds like a lot of you are studying things related to this. So the first thing that is a challenge, why truth gets a run for its money these days, is that we all live, especially information professionals, live in a world of total noise, right? Information is essentially like a second skin for us. We've got our skin, and then we've got data swirling around us all the time. It's omnipresent. It's easily accessible when you launch your smartphone and stuff like that. And it's hard to find the real stuff when there's so much other stuff swirling around. And the idea of total noise comes from one of my favorite American novelists, David Foster Wallace, who talked about to really try to be informed and literate today is to feel stupid nearly all of the time and to need help. And he wrote this in 2007. before Facebook sort of jumped into the environment of the general population, it was still largely confined to campuses at that point. So multiply this by however many X you care to, since social media is now a ubiquitous feature in the modern landscape. You guys are so nice and you're succulent and you're attentive and stuff like that, but I worry that I'm losing you. How are we doing so far? Filibuster break number 1. Okay, really? No questions? Oh, okay. You've been warned. Yes?
Can you just really quickly talk about the sources of this data? Because some of this is done through phone interviews, some of this is done through analysis of text, right?
Correct. Yes. So, yeah, God, we could geek out a lot about methodology. So we still anchor a lot of our work, and a whole bunch of this statistical stuff that I'm citing to you comes from telephone surveys. Right now, we complete 2/3 of our phone calls to people on cell phones, not landline phones, because 43% of Americans are cell only. They have no landlines at home, and it used to be a great thing, and it's not so much anymore. One of the benefits of using cell phones now to contact people is you get a lot more young folks in your sample, you got a lot more poor folks in your sample, you got a lot more people of color in your sample. The samples are actually slightly better for the diversity's sake. Response rates, though, are horrific. Because people don't answer mystery numbers on their phone. And so a big issue with our work is whether the 9 or 10 or 11% of the population that we know we can reach when a standard Pew survey goes to them. It's in the field for 4 days. We're asking you about your political views and stuff like that. The response rate's about 9%. And the disaster for polling would be if those 9% that you can reach no longer represent the 91% that you can't reach. And we do some testing from time to time. We spend ungodly amounts of Pew money to see whether the non-respondents are different from the respondents. So far, so good, particularly in politics. The people that you talk to, we still get good samples about politics. I'm sure a bunch of you are saying, but what about 2016? The story with 2016 is that people who did polling like Pew actually had a great night on election night. But we were measuring the popular vote. We were not doing state-by-state electoral college work. We did big national samples. And the big national samples, our work was was about 0.7% off from the final vote tallies. So awesome. And we were good in 2012, and we were good in 2008, and we were better than we were in 2004 and 2000. So national polling still looks pretty good under these methodologies, but the modeling that's done, especially for the electoral college stuff, not only included Pew stuff, but it included some really junky stuff that was done state by state. Now, the smart folks who did the probability weighting gave us extra credit for being better, more gold standard practitioners than others, and they lowered the weighting that they gave, the likelihood that crappy state polls were good, but they were still included in the sample, and that didn't work out so well because, especially state by state, a lot of that work didn't show up well, and the prediction models were off. You know, we over-predicted, the polling fraternity over-predicted how many millennials would vote. It under-predicted how many rural, less educated white men would vote. It over-predicted how many Hispanics would vote. It over-predicted how many African Americans would vote. And so that's why you get the election night you did. But that's sort of, we're still feeling okay that polling gives us these kind of data that are worth citing and standing up here and saying this is the reality of the world. We also now do a lot of big data analysis. So this slide that I showed you here, we built a database of all the public pronouncements of public officials, their Facebook posts, their Twitter posts, their press releases, their congressional, their on the floor statements and things like that. And then we looked at their Twitter accounts and we looked at their Twitter followings, and that's how we got these data. So those are not representative sampling. That's other kinds of sampling. So we're now sort of marrying what one of the wonderful scholars of this world talks about: structured data, where you spend a lot of time and money and thinking up front about exactly what you want to collect, and how you want to collect it, and from whom you want to collect it, as opposed to organic data where you take what the world gives you in sometimes really big, nice data sets, like the Twitter data set, but only 24% of adults use Twitter. So you're not talking to 76% of adults and stuff. So there are lots of ways to be careful about these data. Yeah?
There's something I don't understand about all this research on news source. If I'm reading an article from the New York Times that somebody posted on Facebook and I'm doing it on my phone, is the news source social media, print media, or the internet?
We struggled to figure out how to talk to people about that because they're not good about recalling what that is. So we're trying, for instance, to build apps that might be more careful about under what circumstances and stuff like that. So in the Pew questioning, so we're asking people in a survey, we want you to say yes to all of the above. Yes, you get news from national news sources online. Yes, you use your phone to get news. And yes, you get news mediated through social media.
So the definition of news source is whatever the respondents make of it.
Yeah, exactly, self-reported. So we're not fact checking them. So, it's a lot of self-report. Sorry?
Don't ask me because I won't know what to say.
Yeah, well, you would be not knowing what to answer those questions would be a pretty typical response because when you ask people, for a while, everybody in the information world and in the journalism and communication scholarship world wanted that level of granularity. They wanted to know, was the internet more powerful or had greater impact, or because it was participatory, somehow was being processed in different ways from the more consumerish experience that you were getting if you were watching a broadcast TV newscast or something like that. And people just can't reconstruct it. There are so many ways that information is flowing into their lives that we sort of, they can say, yeah, it sometimes comes through my phone, yeah, it sometimes comes through social media, and stuff like that, but that's the best we can do. Plus, it would be a hideous questionnaire if we marched them through each device, each social media platform, and then media sources and stuff like that. You'd have one basic question, like, where did you get news yesterday? And you'd be done with your questionnaire, and people would hate us. We're asking them that over dinner.
And yet we conclude that television's declining and the internet is rising. I don't think that's valid.
Point taken. There are other sort of complementary measures that the audience measures on all kinds of media are not awesome. But we also know that the general audience for news is not nearly now what it used to be
in any form
the era.
Of any source.
Yeah. The other thing that's really different, and people have interesting relationships to it, is because media are ubiquitous and it's not appointment media anymore. A TV clip might be coming through 3 days later from, their wayward cousin on Facebook or something like that. So it's an interesting rearrangement of people's relationships to media. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say something, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I speak for myself. I'm in my 40s, and my group of friends, we don't watch TV hardly at all anymore. Most of our news does come from the internet. We've got kids, we've got lives outside work. We're hardly ever watching TV. I mean, I watch maybe like 2 TV shows and 3 hours of TV a week, and none of it's nice. The question I have is, I used to work for the State Election Commission. I know that one of the things that we did with Pew Institute a few years ago was voter registration information. How is that data used? And in voter registration information, I believe we gave Pew was number of registered voters in districts, precincts, and I think we also gave some information about participation.
Yeah. A number of brilliant points, and then a question for Pew that he gave some data to Pew about voter registration in what state?
South Carolina.
South Carolina. Okay. That's another side of Pew. There are 2 sides of Pew. There's the mothership, the Pew Charitable Trust, and then there's us. We're a legal subsidiary of the Pew Research Center. The trust was the one that ran that election program. And it was the idea behind it was to look at problems in voter administration. Just there are archaic systems, people are double listed in multiple jurisdictions, and the records were sloppy. And so Pew was its point was, we can clean this up and we can have a much better, more consistent national program. go forth and here are some tools to do that. In an interesting way, this came back into our lives in the 2016 election because Donald Trump, candidate Trump, kept saying Pew finds that there's rampant fraud in voting. And we were saying there are multiple listings of multiple people, and it was a confusing system, and it was not well administered in lots of places in this country. We never said there was fraud, but we got drawn into that debate because of that. So Pew used your data, that my colleagues on the other side of the firewall used that data to come up with some recommendations about how to essentially rationalize the system, some of which were widely implemented, some of which have never been implemented, and I think got a pretty mixed record. But it came back to life. If you guys search, Pew election records, that moment that we had, actually, it was in the election and then post-election. We sort of got swept into something that we didn't have anything to do with, and actually was slightly misunderstood.
And I can speak for South Carolina. We had one instance where somebody had voted, then after they voted, they had died before the election. That was that one instance we had of somebody that had voted and died. In case anybody was interested in that.
Yeah.
There was a great deal of rich data on the slide that you had about various media organizations and their level of trust. And when I looked at the Wall Street Journal, and I'm trying to recall whether I read that or interpreted it correctly, it looks like across the spectrum, people trust the Wall Street Journal more than they trust some other organizations. And it looks like at quick glance that's the only one that goes across the board.
We didn't name them all, but yeah.
I'm curious whether you have any observations about a secret sauce that makes BuzzFeed down at the bottom not trusted by everybody across the board, and Wall Street Journal on the other side trusted by everybody, moderates, conservatives.
We don't sort of get deeper, sort of why this source compared with that source and stuff. So there isn't data to sort of answer that question. It's a prominent source. It's a traditional source. So it has the name recognition and the reputational record of the journal is quite solid, as opposed to BuzzFeed, which was iconically a new media thing, and I think maybe just might have suffered or gotten lower votes just for that kind of thing. But I don't have any deeper into that, other than to say that maybe the journal too has managed to live well on both sides of the line. And people know that it's a conservative editorial page, op-ed page and stuff like that, and it knows that doesn't necessarily bleed into the news coverage that comes out on the non-editorial pages.
Okay, thank you.
Did you ever get asked, how do you reconcile a just the facts approach with the subjective decision about what to study in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, I used to live with that when I was a journalist, and it's certainly part of our life now. And you're making choices all the time in my line of work, just the way I was in journalism, sort of what to emphasize, what to pay attention to in the first place, and stuff like that. We can certainly say that we use well-recognized, well-established, nobody challenges the methodologies that give you accurate data. We agonize over sort of the variable stuff like question wording. Oftentimes we have outside reviewers from multiple perspectives to make sure that we're using the right language in the right neutral kind of way. But yeah, and so our organizing principle is a really interesting one, in part because we self-define as a fact tank and we're not supposed to be in the business of changing the world. When I was hired by Pew, one of my questions to them was, well, if that's your organizing principle, how do you keep score? If you're supposed to change the world, you know whether the grant got made, the law got changed, the funding was passed, or whatever. You have metrics to know whether you're a successful philanthropic grantee. When there's no finish line, or when there's no defined change that you're aiming for, how do you keep score? And so we pay a lot of attention to, and labor over how much press coverage we get, which is a first order reading on whether you're generating interesting, relevant information for the culture. We pay as much information now to our web metrics and our social media metrics as we now do to press coverage. And so we agonize about that a lot. But so part of our mission in the world, and again, distinguishing us from the academy, is that we want to be relevant in real time to urgent cultural conversations. We don't want to be after the fact. We don't want to be leisurely. We want to address things that seem front and center, top of the line cultural conversations. So we pick our topics by what we think is most urgent and where we can provide data that others can't or others won't. So like when in the internet unit, we in the past couple of years, we spent a lot more attention to online harassment because it's a big issue, right? Which means we've covered less what people are doing with healthcare because we sort of established a benchmarking with that and stuff like that. But these are really hard choices. And we spent a lot of time after the Snowden revelations and then the Target breach and the Equifax breach and stuff. We spent a lot of money looking at privacy because we felt that was an urgent thing. Lots of other stuff was left on the cutting room floor, but the metric that we were going through is what seems most urgent and where can we be a value add to the conversation. Great questions. Yeah.
One question, do any of these news agencies share their internal survey data with you, or do you, okay.
They don't, they're third-party services that are not bad. They're not perfect. There are lots of complaints, especially from the news agencies. ComScore, Nielsen, any number of Edison and stuff like that do media metrics and stuff like that. Nielsen, huge headline, is out of the diary business as of June, and is radically changing its methodology, so it's getting all of its its core stuff off your set-top box. And they're working with vendors to get those data. It's been an amazing moment. Okay, good. That was a good break. So we're total noise. Mobile it matters a lot more now than it used to, particularly as a news source for people. Social media, this is a number that probably gets as quoted as any other number that Pew generates. Social media is now a pathway to news for lots of people. Now it's 67% get it online. And in the context of facts, we asked folks right after the 2016 election what kind of a problem they think fake news is, and almost two-thirds, 64% of Americans said that fake news is such a problem that it's sowing confusion in the culture about literally what's happening. There is just a lot of confusion related to that. And amazingly, one of the most amazing numbers that our journalism unit has generated, 23%, so almost a quarter of American adults have themselves passed along fake news to other people. 16% have done it inadvertently, but they later found out that what they promoted was wrong. 14% knew it was wrong when they posted it. So if you said yes to either one of those, that's how you got to 23%. But it's not just a Russian thing. There are Americans who are deeply implicated in this. There are also this pervasive sense now that the media especially make up stuff or have deep insufficiencies in their coverage. It's either completely made up or not fully accurate. 51% say it's not fully accurate. And one of my favorite new words actually is a coinage from the mid-90s. It's the word agnotology. It's a neologism. Yes, we have an agnotology fanboy. It's a word that combines two Greek words, agno meaning not knowing, and logi is the science of. And Robert Proctor, a wonderful Stanford historian, basically said that a brand new strategy in this modern era of data hyper saturation is that actors in information wars don't necessarily need to convince you that their information is right. in some cases, they have essentially won the engagement by just making you confused. And confusion has two payoffs. One is you don't believe the other guys. The second is that you're so sort of addled by the situation that you won't work hard to get to the truth, and you're not necessarily deeply committed to the institutions that are trying to give you the truth. So there's a trust decline that goes with agnotology. Proctor coined it as a way to describe how the tobacco industry fought back against the emerging science in the 1950s and early 1960s that smoking causes cancer. And the strategy literally was to just sort of say, science isn't settled, it's not clear, more research is needed and stuff like that. And now it's become part of the playbook of lots of actors in the misinformation space to just sort of, not to convince you that they're right, it's just to convince you that the other side doesn't have all the answers. 81% of Americans before the election said that the supporters of Hillary Clinton and the supporters of Donald Trump couldn't agree on the basic facts of what's going on in the culture. That's sort of a precondition for solving problems. If you don't agree on the facts, you can't sort of get to the next step as this is what's going on, therefore how are we going to deal with it? We also have found that misinformation gets down to the personal level. 26% of Americans, amazingly, 46% of young adults say that false information about them has been posted online. So it's not just sort of a public square problem, it's a problem that goes down to the level of me and my reputation. And reputation is so much more valuable to people now because what happens when you're about to meet somebody or when you're about to go someplace for the first time? What do? You look it up. You stalk them online, and you look them up. And if the stuff is sort of, nasty, challenging, questioning who you are and stuff like that, there's a big payoff, or there's a big loss in your social stature, your economic worth, and all kinds of ways like that. And then here's democracy. Here's one of the things that we released today. We marched people through 23 different democratic values and democratic processes and principles, like working together to solve problems. Elected officials face serious consequences if they have misconduct. And there's a stupendous mismatch between people who say this matters to democracy, this is important to democracy, and the people who say this is true about today's society. So it's a high-rated value, democratic value in people's lives, and we're not doing well in the American estimation on working together, on elected officials facing consequences for misconduct, on campaign contributions not leading to greater political influence and stuff like that. I just have 3 slides of this, but what's striking is just literally the gap between that it still matters to Americans, but that they think we're falling short on these dimensions. The closest one was that military leadership does not publicly support a party. Lots of people say that matters. Lots of people say we're not doing a bad job at that. So that's the lowest level of disagreement about this stuff. But it's a really sort of powerful, I call it the slide of the data of the season in my tweet about it today, because it just in one place shows you how disillusioned people are with the modern, with the current moment. Yeah.
Was that data released?
It was released today. If you go to Pew Research now, the first thing you'll see on our site is this 158-page report that marches people through how they think about voting, how they think about the representation in the Senate, how they think about the Electoral College and stuff like that. It's an awesome report. This is an amazing piece of Pew data that...
Wait, can I back up?
Yeah, sure.
How long did it take you to do that fabulous 150? Like start to finish?
Yeah, start to finish. We started talking about it literally after Election Day in 2016. That's not our norm. It's the sort of gestation period for this was longer than normal. But we knew that sort of fundamental questions about democratic principles were kind of more up in the air now. And it wasn't clear how Americans thought about them. And it wasn't clear how they mapped with people's identities and things like that. And so that's one of the longest ones we've ever done. And one of the big challenges of writing The survey related to this was that there weren't, often when we start a survey, we go back to databases of survey questions and sort of say, well, this was asked in 1994, and this was asked in 2003, and this was asked in 1986. Basic questions about, is the Senate the right way to think about a body of our legislative branch? That didn't exist. So a lot of these questions had no modern precursors. And some of them were just so new. I mean, we asked a battery of questions. One of the chapters in the report is how people think about representativeness. How would they want their governor to decide an issue where the governor liked it, a majority of the population didn't like it, but I liked it? And we marked people through these sort of various ways, and there isn't a settled way that Americans think about this. It's very contextual, very contingent, and interesting. So that's why it took so long. That's the outer boundary of how long it takes Pew work to get done. Yeah.
And what was the sample size?
It's 4,700, I think. We built one of the other things that we've done to make life interesting for ourselves is built a panel. So it used to be Pew just was built on one-shot phone surveys. And now, since 2014, we've built a representative panel of all adults, which has, pluses and minuses. So the great plus of that is we now, because we keep talking to the same people over time, we're just building up incredibly rich insights into their lives. We know their media habits. We now know what their political values are. We know how they think about democracy. We know their tech profiles and stuff like that. That's amazing. You know that, and if you did a phone survey on that, it would be a 2-hour survey, and people would kill you if you did that.
Yeah.
And so that's great. There are lots of ways we can work with the data that we couldn't if it were one-shot phone surveys. The interesting challenge that we keep monitoring is that once you're in the panel, first of all, we give you an incentive to do it, and maybe that changes the way people answer, and they become interestingly sort of accomplished poll takers. We wouldn't call them professional poll takers, but they remember their previous answers, and they sort of know the Pew game, and what kind of stuff we're going to ask and how we're going to ask it and stuff like that. And you worry that bias unintendedly creeps into the process just because these people become increasingly savvy about who we are, what we want to know, how to dodge. If they don't want to answer lots of questions, they know how to answer no and not get the lots of follow-up questions and things like that. So it's there are interesting ways that we're having to think about mode effects and respondent effects as we build a panel. But and we're going to build it out to 10,000 people by the end of the year, and so it's going to be hugely exciting. What am I doing? I should probably get to the library part. Well, I want to show you our moving mountains because this is like our graphics department. This is the money shot for the graphics department. Since 1994, we've asked Americans a series of questions about their political values and stuff like that. How do they think about the government responding to poor people? How do they think about gay marriage? How do they think about race relations and things like that? And we have these anchoring questions, and we've asked them the same way since 1994. And what's happened, start here, look, there's lots of centrists, basically, who have mixed, political values, and there are conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans. And I'm just going to, come on. Serves me right. Here. So here, this shows you how the center has, the parties essentially have ideologically purified themselves. People are now more consistently liberal or more consistently conservative than they used to be in these value statements. And one of the core things about polarization is that people's political and partisan identities now are a stronger predictor by factors of 3 and 4 and 5 times to all the other stuff in social science that used to matter. People's education levels used to be a really awesome predictor of all sorts of things about them. Lots of behaviors, lots of attitudes and stuff like that. Now you know their party and partisan identity. You know a lot about how they, and not only how they think and what their beliefs are, but how they go through life, what matters to them. I'm going to skip these because it just shows partisan stuff. What am I doing here? Oh, here's one. No. So people now are beginning to, this is political scientists call this affective polarization, which is not only do you think that people on the other side sort of have bad ideas and they're not with you on on your same political team, they're bad people.
Yeah.
So now that when we ask, attention pairs, are they closed-minded or open-minded, immoral or moral, lazy or hardworking, everybody says about the other team that they're awful, right? They've got the worst trait rather than the best trait. And it spills over into where they want to live. They don't have friends. We don't have historic data on this, but Republicans and Democrats are equally now likely not to have too many friends on the other team. Anyway, it's in an interesting way. You can see this actually in the business world too, where business organizations have to be careful about their policies, their pronouncements, their Twitter feeds, their stuff like that, because all of a sudden you can get swept up into the partisan vortex, and people are saying yay for you, or they're destroying your products and services on Vines and YouTube videos and stuff like that. So this partisan polarization has infected lots more parts of life. That's sort of the big story that I tell there. The other thing that's going on, of course, is that the online environment itself is not too swift for people's relationships with each other. 41% of Americans have been harassed online. Some of it's been really severe. 18% is the really bad stuff, the physical threats, harassment, sustained harassment, stalking, and sexual harassment.
Yeah, tax.
And there's just this widespread judgment that whatever happens on social media is worse than what happens face-to-face. That there's a disinhibition that goes along when people are not looking at each other face-to-face or not even hearing each other's voices, that they're less respectful, less likely to get to the end of a conversation with an agreement, less civil, more focused, less likely to actually debate a policy idea as opposed to start getting ad hominem right away. They're much less likely to be sensitive, informative, and angry and stuff like that. Okay, so here's the happy part of the story, and it's the end part of the story. In this environment, in this challenging environment, people want people like you. They want smart allies. In a way, it's going back to sort of things that librarians have always been good at, but maybe haven't celebrated or haven't emphasized in a while. But people want you in their networks because you're smarter, you're less crazy, and you're just more accomplished in doing lots of the things they want. They want improved curators. In an information overloaded world, they want smart people to help them get through, help them navigate information spaces smartly. Librarians are particularly good, and I think you get a lot of credit just because you're real human beings, and you're nice and you're smart and stuff like that, and your engagement with folks is at the personal level, and it's non-challenging, and you're sort of allies and stuff. They want transparency. They want more confidence that they can learn and grow, and librarians are sort of like the archetypes, the poster children of lifelong learners. And in an environment where now people, that's a real deep consciousness that people have. I'm going to show you a slide about that in a minute. You guys not only sort of enable that for people who care about you, but you also sort of, they look to you as examples of how they can live that life. They want just-in-time help in decision-making. They want more training in tech use. So lots of the awards tonight were for folks who are thinking about technology provision and digital guides in libraries and stuff like that. There's a real deep sense that librarians are healers and divide bridgers and stuff like that. And technology smartness is a big part of that story. And they want organizations that will protect them. When we ask a question about this, what it mostly shows up as, they're anxious about their privacy and they don't know how to recapture it, or they don't even know what the sacrifices are. They know they're kind of being manipulated and stuff like that, and they know that they're struggling to find the right information. Yeah.
You talked before about trusting government.
Yeah.
Since most libraries are government funded in some way or another.
You get a get out of jail free card on that one. Yeah, yeah. People don't think of libraries as government institutions. And it's a double-edged proposition. In a way, you get all of the trust benefits of that, but in a way, they don't necessarily think of you that their taxes are directly implicated in your lives. And our data are just awesomely affirming. If you go to a library, well, just go to our Pew Internet tab, pewinternet.org, and there's a topics page for libraries, and you'll find abundant evidence. People think that you're important. And when we ask them about the impact of a library closing in their community, they would be devastated by it. And part of the answer on that is that at a personal level, they think they maybe could cope, but they are so proud that libraries are serving people who don't otherwise have the resources that the well-off have to get what they need and to have problem solved for that. They like to trust you, and they love that you've rebranded yourself as tech hubs, even though I don't think there has been ever any library promotional campaign that's built around, we offer technology. It's a sort of silent success of libraries that you should be pounding your chest and sort of saying, yeah, we really have, technology is now a deep part of our lives, but people appreciate that. And you know who appreciates that the most? Millennials. They're more likely than other generations to use libraries. They're more likely than, well, I think I have data on that. They're more likely to say that libraries are trustworthy institutions. Here are data about libraries being trusted compared with other kinds of news organizations. And here are nice ways that people sort of give you a vote of confidence that in an information-rich society, libraries help them find information that is trustworthy, learn new things, grow as a person, get information that helps them make decisions. Sort of an amazing array of success in the public imagination. You do pretty well when we ask how well you're meeting the education needs of your local community. And it's similar data when you're meeting the needs of individuals themselves. There's probably more ground to be gained there, and maybe thinking a little bit more intentionally about that. And then I'm going to end with a story about a piece of research we did when we do these. One of the extra methodologies we use is not a methodology at all. It's just a convenient sample of experts. We've built up a large database of folks who will answer our questions. They're technologists, they're scholars, they're builders of the internet. And we asked them about the future of truth. And we got a split verdict. About half the respondents said things are going to get better, and a half said things are going to get worse. And the ones who said it's not going to get better basically said human nature is a fixed thing. This is just another toolkit for people to make each other miserable, right? And trolls will always be out there, and trolls will always just find ways to, play with you and mess around with you and stuff like that. And those who said improvements would come are basically saying, look, we've got a pretty good track record of going through disruptions in technology and the information environment, and humans adjust. They get smarter about it. They build new systems around it. After the printing press was invented, we got universal public education out of it. So societies learn how to cope with these new information environments, and they have new sets of tools. So I need a browser. Oh, I can do this myself. Yes, I can. So this is a story about the future of technology, which essentially the most hopeful people. So the half of those who said things are going to get better in the future, essentially were arguing for a cyborg future, where machines, artificial intelligence and stuff like that, are going to work alongside human beings, and together we're going to conquer more problems than will be created. And my favorite story about a cyborg future came and when there was tons of coverage in 2012 or something like that, when the IBM Watson artificial intelligence system beat Ken Jennings on Jeopardy. And remember his line when he lost was, "I for one welcome the new computer overlords." So when that happened, as the run-up for that coverage was happening, there's a wonderful tech pundit, a guy who now edits Wired magazine, named Nicholas Thompson, and he was covering it, and he watched Watson go through its paces to prepare for beating Jennings, and they were doing lots of computer simulations and stuff like that. And one of the questions on the table was, complete the following phrase. Toto, I have a feeling that. Watson immediately came up with the right answer. I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore, right? But the other thing that Watson did, unlike human beings, was then to spit out other answers and rank them by their probability, their likelihood of being correct. So it got the right answer, and it knew that that was the right answer. But the second answer that Watson generated to the Toto question was Steve Porcaro. Steve Porcaro was a keyboardist for the pop band Toto. Awesome, right? He had a half likelihood probability from the right answer, but that was cool. The third answer, though, was a mystery. You know, it was the kung fu actor Jackie Chan. Nobody could figure out how this came up, and so Nicholas Thompson writes for the New York Times, writes a piece about Watson and its preparations for conquering Ken Jennings, and said that the Jackie Chan answer proves, or is evidence, that it's just not, you know, artificial intelligence hasn't quite hit the promised land yet. And the piece gets run in the New York Times Magazine, and it's posted on the New York Times website. And relatively deep in the comments thread on that is actually a commenter who said, actually, there is a connection between Jackie Chan and Toto, and here's what it is. So in the movie Rush Hour 1, Jackie Chan is a Hong Kong detective who's come to America and who's working with a street-savvy American detective to solve a kidnapping from Hong Kong. And, oh, this comes out loud.
Describe the top of whatever.
No, sorry, wrong one. This is, they're talking in the car, they're planning how they're going to tackle the crime, and Chan is asking for the help of the American detective. Oh. How can we make this louder?
How do we make this louder?
I'm the president, I'm the emperor, I'm the king. I'm Michael Jackson, you Tito. Your ass belong to me.
Okay. So then, in Rush Hour 2, that conversation is reprised. But the American is in Hong Kong at a disco with Jackie Chan.
This man will try the most deadly game in China. You think that's game? I'm from Los Angeles. We invented game. Give me that badge. No, you're a civilian. In Hong Kong, I'm Michael Jackson. You're Toto. Me, Tito.
Did you get that? Toto's what we had last night for dinner. So that's how Toto ends up in Jackie Chan's life, and that's why Jackie Chan is not the stupidest answer to a question about Toto and stuff like that. So maybe that's the future, the cyborg future, where artificial intelligence is awesome at a lot of things and gets you a lot of the way towards the correct answer, but it takes that really smart Sherlock Holmes detective to get the final piece of truth that becomes the bigger reality. So that's the future I hold out for you. God be with you. Thank you.